Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Listen, when the Galactic Council decided to build Beacon's Watch, a collaborative research station floating in the absolute middle of nowhere, they probably thought they were being clever. "Let's put all our species together," they said. "We'll study xenobiology," they said. What could possibly go wrong? Well, here's what could go wrong. You could end up with 3 adolescent apex predators treating your multi-million credit facility like their personal chew toy. The station hung in the void like a metal flower, its petals spinning slowly to generate artificial gravity. Beautiful, really, if you ignored the scorch marks on the outer hull and the frantic distress signals pinging through subspace every other week. The xenobiology wing occupied the lower third sector, a maze of habitats and laboratories designed to house specimens from across known space. Most of those specimens were peaceful, compliant, well-behaved. Then there were the Shaxel cubs. Dr. Quillmesh skittered through the observation corridor on 6 trembling legs, his antennae twitching with barely suppressed panic. The insectoid researcher had not slept in what humans would call 3 days. His compound eyes darted between datapads and the reinforced transparasteel window overlooking Habitat 9. Behind that window, chaos had taken physical form and decided to grow claws. "They have destroyed another feeding mechanism," Quillmesh chittered to his assistant, mandibles clicking in distress. "The 5th one, this month. The manufacturers are threatening to stop shipping to us entirely." Inside the habitat, 3 shapes moved with liquid grace through an environment designed to mimic the hunting grounds of Shax Prime. Rocky outcroppings, dense vegetation analogs, water features. All of it had been meticulously crafted to make the cubs feel at home. The cubs had responded by systematically demolishing everything that wasn't bolted down. And then they started on the things that were. Fang Hu, the largest of the 3, lounged atop a synthetic boulder, his leonine body stretched out in deceptive relaxation. His fur was deep amber, striped with black, and his eyes, all 6 of them arranged in 2 rows across his elongated skull, tracked every movement in the corridor beyond the glass. When he yawned, he revealed teeth designed by evolution to punch through bone. Shadewalks prowled the perimeter, her smaller frame moving like smoke through the habitat's shadows. Her coat was darker, almost black, with silver undertones that caught the light when she moved. She was the thinker, the planner, which made her the most dangerous, in Quillmesh's professional opinion. And then there was Blazeclaw, currently attempting to climb the habitat's 30-meter wall using nothing but determination and claws that could score metal. His rust-red fur stood on end, making him look twice his actual size. He was the wild card, the unpredictable element, the one who had bitten through a handler's environmental suit last month just to see what would happen. Spoiler alert, what happened was a medical emergency and a very expensive lawsuit. "The Shaxel Embassy has lodged another formal complaint," Quillmesh continued, wringing 4 of his 6 hands together. "They say we are incompetent, that we cannot handle their youth, that we—" He paused, checking his datapad. "Wouldn't know proper dominance hierarchy if it bit us in our soft, pathetic thoraxes." "That seems oddly specific," his assistant murmured. "Ambassador Threxnall has strong opinions about our thoraxes." Down in the habitat, Fang Hu suddenly stood, his attention locked on something in the corridor. His hackles rose, a deep rumble building in his chest that made the transparasteel vibrate. Shadewalks immediately dropped into a hunting crouch, her own growl harmonizing with his. Even Blazeclaw stopped his climbing attempts, twisting his head at an angle that shouldn't have been anatomically possible to focus on the disturbance. They had sensed something. Someone. Ruby walked down the corridor like she owned it, her military-issue boots striking the deck plating with confident, measured steps. She was tall for a human, broad-shouldered, with dark skin and hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Her uniform was pristine, her posture perfect, and her expression suggested she had seen far too much nonsense in her life to be impressed by any more of it. Quillmesh practically teleported to intercept her, all 6 legs moving in agitated patterns. "Lieutenant, you cannot be serious. You cannot possibly be serious. Please tell me this is some form of human humor that my translator is misinterpreting." Ruby stopped, one eyebrow raising fractionally. "Dr. Quillmesh, good to see you too. The Cubs have injured 3 handlers. They have destroyed equipment valued at—" He consulted his datapad. 800,000 credits. They refuse sustenance. They refuse medical examinations. They refuse all attempts at behavioral modification. The meditation specialist lasted 8 minutes before requesting immediate evacuation. "I read the reports," Ruby said calmly. "Then you understand this is impossible. We are scheduling transport back to Shaxx Prime. It is a diplomatic disaster, yes, but better than fatalities. Which is exactly why I'm here." Quillmesh's antennae drooped. "Command actually approved this?" "Command is desperate," Ruby corrected. "There's a difference. They're willing to try anything before they admit failure to the Galactic Council." She moved past him to the observation window, and Quillmesh reluctantly followed. Inside the habitat, all 3 cubs were now focused entirely on Ruby. Fang Hu had descended from his boulder, approaching the transparasteel with slow, deliberate steps. His lips curled back from his fangs, revealing that impressive dental arrangement. Shadewalks flanked him on the left, her body low, muscles coiled. Blazeclaw took the right, his tail lashing, behind him with enough force to leave gouges in the synthetic stone. "They look upset," Quillmesh ventured. "They look interested," Ruby said. "There's a difference. How can you possibly—" "Body language. Fang Hu's approach is controlled, not frenzied. Shadewalks is evaluating, not attacking. And Blazeclaw—" She paused, watching the rust-colored cub's erratic movements. "Well, Blazeclaw is being Blazeclaw, but even he's focused rather than chaotic." Quillmesh made a sound like escaping steam. "You have read their files for 6 hours. I have studied Shaxxle behavioral patterns for 9 years. I am telling you, as an expert, this will not work." Ruby turned to face him, and something in her expression made the doctor take an involuntary step backward. "With respect, Doctor, you've studied them wrong." What? How dare?" "You've been treating them like alien specimens, like things to be observed, contained, managed from a safe distance." Ruby gestured toward the habitat. "They're not specimens. They're adolescents. Teenagers, by human developmental standards. And they're acting out because nobody has established proper authority. We have tried authority. Shaxxle diplomatic envoys, behavioral specialists, containment fields. You've tried everything except understanding what they actually need." Ruby's voice was patient but firm, the tone of someone explaining something very simple to someone who should already know it. Shaxxle are pack predators with rigid hierarchical structures. These cubs were removed from their family groups before they finished socialization. They're searching for a hierarchy to fit into, and everyone here keeps either cowering from them or trying to be their friend. What else would you suggest? Challenging them to single combat? Sort of. Quillmesh's antennae stood straight up. You are insane. I'm qualified. Ruby pulled out her own datapad, flicking through her service record. Frontier colony upbringing, 15 years working with pack animals, military canine unit training, xenobiology cross-species certification. I've trained everything from Terran wolves to Altarian hunting beasts. The principles are universal. Principles, Quillmesh repeated weakly. Respect, not fear. Leadership, not domination. Boundaries, consistency, and follow-through. Ruby pocketed the datapad. These cubs don't need another scientist studying them. They need someone who speaks their language. Their language is snarls and violence. Exactly. Ruby smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Lucky for everyone, I'm fluent. She turned back to the window. Inside, Fang Hu had pressed himself against the transparasteel, his breath fogging the surface. His eyes, all 6 of them, locked onto Ruby's. For a long moment, Human and Shaxel stared at each other. Fang Hu's growl deepened, a challenge that resonated through the deck plating. Ruby didn't blink. Slowly, deliberately, Fang Hu's ears flattened against his skull. His growl cut off mid-rumble. He dropped his gaze first, turning away from the window with what could only be described as confusion. Quillmesh's mandibles hung open. How did you? Eye contact. He tested me. I didn't back down. He broke first. Ruby's expression softened fractionally. He's still just a kid. A very large, very dangerous kid. But a kid. He wanted to know if I'd flinch. And you didn't. Growing up on a frontier colony teaches you not to flinch. The wildlife there didn't care about your feelings either. She straightened her uniform. Now, I'm going to need access to the habitat. Full access, no observation teams, no emergency protocols running unless I specifically signal for help. Absolutely not. Doctor, with respect, this is happening. The question is whether you're going to help or get in the way. Quillmesh cycled through several colors, his exoskeleton flushing from green to purple to a distressed yellow. If you die, the paperwork will be astronomical. If I die, you can put, "I told you so," on my memorial plaque. This is not funny. It's a little funny, Ruby said, but her expression had gone serious. Doctor, I know you care about these cubs. I've read your notes, seen your observation logs. You've been working yourself to exhaustion trying to find a solution, but sometimes the solution isn't more study, it's action. Trust me. Or at least trust that Command wouldn't have sent me if they had any better options. That logic, depressingly, seemed to register. Quillmesh sagged, his legs folding slightly. 48 hours, he said quietly. Command has given you 48 hours to show improvement. After that, the transport arrives and the cubs return to Shaxx Prime. The diplomatic fallout will be... He trailed off, unable to even quantify it. Then I'd better not waste time. Ruby headed for the habitat access door. Wait, you are going in there now? Immediately? Without preparation? The longer I wait, the longer they think I'm afraid. Can't have that. But supplies, equipment, safety protocols, I've got everything I need. Ruby patted her belt, which held nothing more threatening than a water bottle and a small pouch of what looked like dried meat. Well, almost everything. I'll need you to disable the automated defense systems. Don't want them interfering. Those systems are designed to prevent exactly this kind of suicidal behavior. Consider this officially authorized suicidal behavior then. Ruby keyed in her access code at the habitat door. Warning lights flashed, amber, sirens whooped softly, and a pleasant automated voice reminded her that unauthorized entry could result in injury, death, or invalidation of her insurance policies. She ignored all of it. The door hissed open, flooding the corridor with the humid, organic smell of the habitat. The scent of predators, territory markers, and something primal that made the hindbrain sit up and pay attention. Inside, the three cubs had gone absolutely still. Ruby stepped through, and the door sealed behind her with a finality that made Quillmesh whimper. She was in the habitat, alone, with three teenage apex predators who had hospitalized their last three handlers. Ruby took a deep breath, centered herself, and smiled. "All right then," she murmured. "Let's see if you kids understand universal." In the observation corridor, Quillmesh pressed all 6 hands against the transparasteel, his antennae rigid with tension. And in the habitat, Fang Hu's lips curled back, Shadewalks began to circle, and Blaze Claw started that unsettling clicking sound that usually preceded violence. The show, as humans like to say, was about to begin. The thing about walking into a habitat full of predators, Ruby reflected, was that you had about 3 seconds to establish whether you were a threat, prey, or something else entirely. Those 3 seconds determined whether you walked out with a fascinating story or became a cautionary tale. She had spent those 3 seconds standing perfectly still just inside the door, hands relaxed at her sides, breathing steady. Not aggressive, not submissive, just present. The cubs hadn't expected that. Fang Hu approached first, naturally, because he was the self-appointed alpha and had a reputation to maintain. His massive paws made almost no sound on the habitat floor despite his size. He had to mass at least 200 kilograms, all muscle and fang and predatory intent. The way he moved reminded Ruby of the mountain cats back on her colony world, that flowing, liquid grace that promised explosive violence at a moment's notice. He stopped 3 meters away, hackles raised, lips curled back to display every single one of those impressive teeth. The growl that emanated from his chest was less sound and more physical force, vibrating through the humid air. Ruby didn't move. Shadewalks had circled to the left, using the synthetic vegetation for cover that didn't quite hide her sleek form. Her eyes, all 6 of them, like living emeralds arranged in 2 parallel rows, never left Ruby. She was evaluating, calculating, running probability matrices in that clever brain. Ruby could practically see the thoughts forming. New human, different behavior pattern, potential threat level unknown. Blaze Claw, because Blaze Claw was Blaze Claw, had climbed halfway up a fake tree and was making that clicking sound again, a staccato rhythm that set teeth on edge. His tail lashed back and forth, and Ruby could see the muscles bunching in his shoulders. He was going to pounce. Maybe not right now, maybe not in the next minute, but eventually. It was simply his nature. Fang Hu took another step closer, then another. His growl intensified, becoming almost conversational in its complexity, a mix of threat, challenge, and curiosity. In the language of predators, he was essentially asking, "Who are you? What are you? Why aren't you running?" Ruby had 3 options here. She could back down, which would establish her as prey and end very badly. She could escalate, which would turn this into a genuine fight and also end very badly because, surprisingly, humans didn't win bare-handed combat against 200-kilogram murder machines. Or she could do the unexpected. She chose option 3. "At ease," Ruby said. The command came out sharp, crisp, carrying the weight of absolute authority. It was the voice drill sergeants used on recruits who thought they were tough. The voice canine handlers used on dogs who'd forgotten their training. The voice that cut through instinct and hit something deeper. Pack hierarchy, social structure, the fundamental understanding that someone was in charge, and it wasn't you. The effect was immediate, and, judging by Quilmesh's strangled gasp from the observation window, completely shocking. Fang Hu froze mid-step, his growl cutting off like someone had flipped a switch. His ears swiveled forward, then back, then forward again in confusion. His posture shifted fractionally, weight redistributing, muscles relaxing by microscopic degrees. Shadewalks emerged from her cover, head tilted at an angle that suggested deep cognitive dissonance. Her tail, which had been lashing in agitation, went still. Even Blazeclaw stopped clicking, his entire body going rigid on his perch. All three cubs stared at Ruby with expressions that transcended species. Pure, undiluted confusion. Ruby held her ground, maintaining eye contact with Fang Hu, but keeping the others in her peripheral vision. She kept her posture relaxed, but upright, confident, but not threatening. The silence stretched out, thick with possibility. Then, slowly, Fang Hu lowered himself. Not all the way to the ground, but into a half-crouch that took him from threatening to merely cautious. His hackles smoothed down, his lips covered his teeth. It was a submissive gesture. In the observation corridor, something clattered to the floor, probably Quilmesh dropping his datapad. Ruby allowed herself a small smile. "Good," she said, keeping her voice firm but warm. "Very good." She took one measured step forward. Fang Hu tensed but didn't retreat. Another step. Shadewalks shifted her weight but stayed in place. A third step, and Ruby was within striking distance of the largest, most aggressive of the three cubs. Fang Hu's nostrils flared, taking in her scent. His eyes, all six of them, studied her with an intensity that would have been unnerving if Ruby hadn't spent half her life being evaluated by predators. She could see the thoughts forming behind those alien features, processing new information, recalibrating assumptions. "You've been acting out," Ruby said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than addressing a creature that could disembowel her with one swipe. "Destroying equipment, hurting handlers, refusing food. You've been trying to establish dominance because nobody here understands what you need. Isn't that right?" Fang Hu made a sound, something between a growl and a chirp. It wasn't threatening, just responsive. "The handlers were afraid of you. The specialists tried to analyze you. The diplomatic envoys tried to reason with you using politics you don't understand or care about." Ruby took another step, now close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from Fang Hu's body. "But here's what nobody told you. On this station, in this habitat, I'm in charge. Not you. Me. Understand?" Fang Hu's ears flattened against his skull. Not in aggression, in acknowledgement. His posture dropped lower, and that massive head dipped in what was unmistakably a gesture of deference. Ruby reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement, and placed her hand on top of Fang Hu's head between his ears. His fur was coarser than she expected, warm and slightly oily. She could feel the tremor of tension in his muscles, the barely contained power. She applied pressure, firm but not aggressive, pushing his head down further. Fang Hu went with it, folding his legs until his belly touched the ground. "At ease," Ruby repeated, softer this time. "You can relax now. I've got this." Something in those words, or maybe in her tone, seemed to flip a switch. Fang Hu's entire body went loose, tension draining out like water. He let out a long, shuddering breath that was almost a sigh. Shadewalks approached cautiously, her movements careful and deliberate. She stopped just outside arm's reach, studying Ruby with those intelligent green eyes. "You're the smart one, aren't you?" Ruby said, meeting her gaze. "You've been watching, analyzing, trying to figure out the patterns. You know we're not food, but you couldn't understand why we kept acting like prey. Shadewalks made a soft trilling sound, almost like a question. The answer is, most species here don't have a dominance hierarchy like yours. They think of relationships differently. Cooperation instead of submission, negotiation instead of challenge. But humans, Ruby smiled. We remember. Our ancestors ran in packs, hunted in groups, built societies on hierarchy and trust. We're not so different from you when you strip away the fancy technology. She held out her hand, palm up, non-threatening. Shadewalks sniffed it delicately, her whiskers twitching. Then, in a gesture that made Ruby's chest tighten with unexpected emotion, the cub pressed her muzzle into Ruby's palm. Contact, trust, acceptance. Good girl, Ruby murmured. A crash from above made them both look up. Blazeclaw had fallen out of his tree, or more likely, launched himself out, and was now sprawled on the ground in an undignified heap. He scrambled upright, shook himself violently, and bounded over with all the grace of a landslide. "And you're the Chaos Agent," Ruby said, unable to suppress a laugh as Blazeclaw skidded to a stop and immediately started sniffing her with manic intensity. The wild card. The one who does things just to see what happens. Blazeclaw's response was to stick his entire head into Ruby's torso in what might have been an attempt at affection or possibly an attempt to knock her over. It was hard to tell with him. Ruby scratched behind his ears, and the rust-colored cub made a sound like a malfunctioning engine. Purring, she realized. He was purring. All three of them had the capacity for contentment, for satisfaction, for the simple pleasure of being touched by someone who wasn't afraid. They'd just never had the chance to express it. "All right," Ruby said, gently extracting herself from Blazeclaw's enthusiastic greeting. "Let's establish some ground rules. First, when I give a command, you follow it. Not eventually, not when you feel like it. Immediately. Second, no destroying equipment unless I specifically tell you it's okay. Third, no hurting anyone. Ever. I don't care how annoying they are." She pulled out the pouch from her belt, extracting a strip of dried meat. All three cubs' attention locked onto it with laser focus. Their nostrils flared. Blazeclaw started drooling. "This is called positive reinforcement," Ruby continued. "Good behavior gets rewards. Bad behavior gets nothing. Simple, effective, and works across every species I've ever trained." She held the meat up. "Fang Hu, sit." Fang Hu stared at her, then at the meat, then back at her. His expression suggested he had no idea what she was talking about. Ruby waited, hand raised, not moving. The silence stretched out. Fang Hu shifted his weight, clearly debating whether to just take the food. But something, that earlier moment of dominance, that instinctual understanding of hierarchy, held him back. Finally, awkwardly, Fang Hu lowered his hindquarters to the ground. It wasn't pretty, and his posture suggested deep confusion about this entire situation, but technically, he was sitting. "Good." Ruby tossed him the meat. He snatched it out of the air with reflexes that defied physics. "Very good. See? Not so hard." She pulled out another strip. "Shadewalks, your turn. Sit." Shadewalks, who had been watching Fang Hu's success intently, immediately folded herself into a sitting position with far more grace. She looked almost smug about it. Ruby laughed and tossed her the reward. "Show off." Blazeclaw, not wanting to be left out, sat without being asked. Then stood up. Then sat again. Then did a little spin. Then sat backwards. The cub was clearly throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. "Points for enthusiasm," Ruby said, tossing him a piece. But let's work on impulse control. For the next half hour, Ruby ran them through basic commands. Sit, stay, come, down. The cubs picked it up with startling speed. Shade walks because she was clever, Fang Hu because he was competitive, and Blazeclaw because food was involved, and he would do literally anything for food. In the observation corridor, a small crowd had gathered. Quillmesh was frantically taking notes, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Other station personnel pressed against the window, watching the impossible unfold before their eyes. The meditation specialist, who'd lasted 8 minutes, stood with his mouth hanging open. She's training them, like animals. They are animals, someone pointed out. Yes, but they're sapient animals, intelligent, capable of abstract thought. So are dogs, another voice chimed in. Doesn't mean they don't need structure. Quillmesh wasn't listening to the commentary. He was watching Ruby move through the habitat, with the cubs following her like oversized, deadly puppies. She'd established patterns, routines, expectations. The cubs responded with what could only be described as eagerness. Impossible, he whispered. This is impossible. But it was happening anyway. Inside the habitat, Ruby called a break, sitting down on one of the synthetic boulders. Immediately, all 3 cubs crowded around her. Fang Hu lay down with his head near her feet, Shadewalks pressed against her side, and Blazeclaw sprawled across everyone in a tangle of limbs and tail. You're not monsters, Ruby said quietly, scratching Shadewalks behind the ears. You're just kids, scared, confused kids who didn't understand the rules. But that's okay. We're going to figure this out together. Fang Hu made a rumbling sound, almost like agreement. Though I should mention, Ruby continued, we've only got about 46 hours to convince everyone you're not going to eat anybody. So maybe we should work on your public relations. The sound of clapping, slow, deliberate, and dripping with condescension, echoed through the habitat's speakers. Ruby looked up to see a slug-like alien pressing against the observation window, his body rippling with colors that suggested profound displeasure. Bureaucrat Wexnell, if she remembered the briefing correctly. His translator crackled to life. How touching! The human thinks she has achieved something. Perhaps next, she will teach them to fetch. Ruby stood, gently dislodging the cubs. They sensed the change in her mood, and immediately went on alert, looking for the threat. Bureaucrat Wexnall, Ruby said pleasantly. To what do I owe the interruption? I am here to inform you that regardless of this display, the decision stands. The cubs will be transported back to Shax Prime in 46 hours. Your commanding officer has been overruled. Ruby's expression went very still. Is that so? The station cannot risk further incidents. The diplomatic situation is too delicate. These creatures have proven themselves unmanageable, and one afternoon of tricks does not change that reality. These creatures, Ruby said, her voice dropping to something dangerous, have names, and they're not tricks. They're training. There's a difference. Semantics, Wexnell dismissed. The transport has been scheduled. Please prepare the specimens for transfer. The cubs sensed Ruby's anger and responded to it, rising to their feet with hackles raised. Fang Hu's growl was like thunder. Stand down, Ruby said quietly, and incredibly, they did. They settled back, still alert but controlled. Wexnall's colors shifted to something that might have been surprise. You think you have tamed them? Made them safe? You are deluded. I think, Ruby said carefully, that they were never the problem. The problem was everyone treating them like things to be contained instead of people to be understood. They are not people. They are animals. So am I, Ruby said. So are you. We're all animals, bureaucrat. Some of us just have better PR. She turned away from the window, dismissing him. We're done here. I have work to do. You have 46 hours, Wexnall repeated, and then reality reasserts itself. The speaker clicked off. Ruby stood very still for a long moment, fists clenched. Then she felt something warm press against her leg. Shadewalks, offering comfort in the only way she knew how. Thanks, Ruby murmured, running her hand along the cub's spine. I'm okay. But she wasn't okay. Because Wexnall was right about one thing. 46 hours wasn't enough time to undo months of mistakes. It wasn't enough time to prove these cubs could integrate into station society. It wasn't enough time to prevent a diplomatic disaster. Unless something changed. Ruby looked at the three cubs, all watching her with expressions that transcended species: trust, loyalty, hope. All right, she said. Change of plans. If we've only got 46 hours, we're going to make them count. Advanced training starts now. Fang Hu tilted his head questioningly. Ruby grinned, and it was the expression of someone who'd just decided that if she was going down, she was going down fighting. Time to show everyone what you three can really do. The next 30 hours passed in a blur of commands, corrections, and small victories that felt like conquering mountains. Ruby pushed the cubs hard, but not cruelly. She taught them patience through waiting exercises, making them hold position while she walked away, turned her back, even left the habitat entirely. Fang Hu struggled with this the most, his natural dominance making submission difficult. But he learned. They all did. She taught them impulse control through food exercises. Blazeclaw, predictably, found this torture. The rust-colored cub would vibrate with barely contained energy, whining and clicking, before finally mastering the ability to wait for permission. When he succeeded, his pride was almost palpable. Shadewalks excelled at everything, naturally. She learned to respond to hand signals, to distinguish between different tone commands, to anticipate what Ruby wanted before the words were even spoken. The dark-furred cub was scary, smart, and Ruby made mental notes to keep her challenged or risk boredom leading to mischief. By the second day, they were running cooperative hunting simulations. Ruby would hide treat pouches throughout the habitat and give commands to coordinate their search. Fang Hu, left flank, shade walks, high ground, Blazeclaw, center sweep. They moved like a military unit. Precision, coordination, trust. Word spread through the station. Scientists, engineers, even the cafeteria staff started finding excuses to pass by the observation windows. They watched three predators who'd been deemed uncontrollable now sitting on command, moving in formation, responding to a human's directions with eager compliance. Dr. Quillmesh spent more time in the corridor than his office, his initial skepticism transforming into scientific fascination. The behavioral adaptation rate is extraordinary, he muttered into his recorder. Subject Fang Hu has reduced aggressive displays by 93%. Subject Shadewalks demonstrates problem-solving capabilities beyond initial assessments. Subject Blazeclaw remains unpredictable, but shows marked improvement in impulse regulation. During a brief rest period, Quillmesh entered the habitat himself, a first. The cubs eyed him with curiosity, but remained calm, responding to Ruby's presence as their anchor. "How?" Quillmesh asked simply. "How did you achieve this?" Ruby scratched Fang Hu behind the ears, the massive cub leaning into her touch. "I grew up on a frontier colony. We had working dogs, security animals, local wildlife that would kill you if you showed fear or disrespect. My grandmother taught me something important. Animals don't want to fight. They want to know where they stand in the world. Give them structure, boundaries, someone to trust. They'll follow you anywhere. But they are not Terran animals. No, Ruby agreed. But the principles are universal. Hierarchy, trust, consistency. Every pack species understands these things, even if the details differ. Quillmesh's antennae twitched thoughtfully. The Shaxel government has been notified of your progress. They are intrigued. They wish to observe before the transport arrives. Good. We'll be ready. What Ruby didn't say was that ready was relative. The cubs had come far, but they were still adolescents with impulses, instincts, and the capacity for explosive violence. All it would take was one mistake, one moment of lost control, and everything would collapse. She pushed that thought away and focused on the next drill. The alarm, when it came, was not gradual or polite. Sirens shrieked through the station's corridors, red emergency lighting bathing everything in hellish color. The automated voice that usually spoke in pleasant, measured tones now barked urgent warnings. Hull breach detected. Unauthorized vessels approaching. All personnel to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. Ruby was in the habitat, running the cubs through scent discrimination exercises when the world went sideways. The cubs immediately went on high alert, ears swiveling, bodies tensing, hunting instincts taking over. At ease, Ruby commanded, but her voice was tight. Something was very wrong. Quillmesh's voice crackled through her communicator, high-pitched, with panic. Ruby. Pirates. Malkin marauders. They have breached the xenobiology wing. The connection cut out. Ruby's blood went cold. The xenobiology wing. They were targeting the specimens. Valuable, rare, expensive specimens that could be sold on black markets across the galaxy. They were targeting the cubs. The habitat's emergency lockdown engaged automatically, heavy blast doors beginning to seal. Ruby had maybe 10 seconds before she was trapped inside. She could leave. Should leave. Protocol demanded it. But that would mean leaving 3 terrified adolescents alone while armed pirates ransacked the wing. Decision made. Ruby hit the emergency override, keeping the doors from fully sealing. The cubs crowded around her, sensing her tension, looking to her for guidance. Outside, she could hear the sounds of forced entry, explosive charges, shouting in languages she didn't recognize, the distinctive whine of energy weapons. Fang Hu growled, deep and threatening. Shadewalks had gone completely still, all predatory focus. Blazeclaw was clicking again, that sound that meant violence was coming. Ruby's mind raced. The pirates would reach this habitat in minutes. They'd have weapons, armor, numbers. She had 3 partially trained cubs and her wits. The cubs looked at her, waiting for orders, trusting her. "All right," Ruby said quietly, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. "New lesson. This one's important." She met each of their gazes in turn. Guard. The word hung in the air like a live grenade. Guard. It wasn't a command Ruby had taught them. Not explicitly. But she'd worked it into their training. The protective instinct. The pack mentality. The understanding that some things were worth defending. The cubs understood. Fang Hu's entire demeanor shifted. Hackles rising not in challenge, but in preparation. Shadewalks melted into the shadows near the habitat entrance, becoming nearly invisible. Blazeclaw stopped his clicking, going preternaturally still, in a way that was somehow more unnerving than his usual chaos. They weren't pets anymore. They were weapons. Controlled, directed, lethal weapons. Ruby positioned herself behind a synthetic outcropping, pulling the cubs back with hand signals. The habitat's partial lockdown meant the pirates would have to breach manually. That bought seconds, maybe minutes. The sound of cutting torches echoed through the door. Sparks showered as molecular bonds separated under industrial heat. Ruby's communicator crackled. Quill mesh, somewhere safe. His voice barely a whisper. "Ruby, security forces are pinned down in the main corridor. The pirates have military-grade equipment. They are coming for the specimens. You must hide. You must—" "I'm not hiding," Ruby said quietly. "Then you will die." "Maybe, but not without making them work for it." The door exploded inward with a concussive blast that made Ruby's ears ring. Smoke billowed through the opening, and through it came 4 figures in mismatched armor, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Malquin marauders. Ruby had read about them. Opportunistic scavengers who raided research stations and sold anything valuable. They'd expected security drones, force fields, maybe a few panicked scientists. They had not expected Ruby, and they definitely had not expected the cubs. The lead pirate, a reptilian species with scaled green skin, swept his weapon across the habitat. "Specimens secured," he barked into his communicator. 3 juvenile shaxel, perfect condition. Buyers will pay—" He never finished the sentence. Ruby's command cut through the smoke like a blade. "Fang Hu, flank left!" The amber-striped cub exploded from cover, moving with speed that defied his bulk. The lead pirate had just enough time to register the incoming threat before 200 kilograms of predator slammed into him. His armor crumpled. His weapon clattered away. He screamed, "Shadewalks! Hi!" The dark-furred cub dropped from above, landing on the second pirate's shoulders with surgical precision. Claws found gaps in armor, found vulnerabilities. The pirate went down hard, unconscious before he hit the ground. "Blaze Claw! Center!" The rust-colored whirlwind lived up to his name, becoming a tornado of claws and teeth and absolute mayhem. The third pirate fired his weapon wildly, missing everything, before Blaze Claw's tail swept his legs and ended the fight. The fourth pirate, showing more survival instinct than his companions, turned to run. "Hold!" Ruby commanded. All 3 cubs froze mid-pursuit, bodies vibrating with adrenaline but obeying absolutely. The pirate made it 3 steps before station security finally arrived, tackled him, and secured him with efficiency born of embarrassment at being beaten to the punch by a human and 3 teenagers. Ruby stepped out from cover, surveying the scene. 3 pirates down, 1 captured, 0 casualties on her side. The cubs stood at attention, waiting for her next command, chests heaving but controlled. "At ease," Ruby said softly. They relaxed immediately, looking to her for approval. She gave it, moving among them, checking for injuries. Minor scratches, nothing serious. Fang Hu was practically vibrating with pride. Shadewalks looked smugly satisfied. Blaze Claw was already trying to claim a pirate's dropped weapon as a trophy. "No," Ruby said firmly, pulling it away. "Not a toy." Blaze Claw huffed, but accepted the denial. The aftermath was chaos of a different kind. Medical teams, security debriefs, damage assessments. The xenobiology wing had been hit hard, but the pirates' main target, the cubs, had instead become their downfall. Bureaucrat Wexnall appeared in the habitat doorway, his slug-like body cycling through colors so rapidly it was almost strobing. For once, he seemed at a loss for words. He began. "You saved the station?" Ruby supplied helpfully. "Demonstrated perfect control under pressure? Proved. They're not the monsters you thought they were." Wexnall deflated visibly. "The transport has been cancelled," he said quietly. "The Shaxel government has formally requested that training continue. They wish to send more cubs. Many more. Ruby raised an eyebrow. Is that so? They were impressed, Wexnall admitted, sounding like each word caused physical pain. You have achieved what we thought impossible. The Council has authorized establishment of a formal cross-species behavioral training program. You will, apparently, be running it. Apparently, Ruby echoed, unable to suppress her smile. Wexnall turned to leave, paused, then looked back. For what it is worth, Lieutenant. I was wrong. About them. About you. About all of it. I know, Ruby said simply. After he left, Dr. Quilmesh scurried in, all 6 legs moving in excited patterns. The data from this incident is extraordinary. The cubs demonstrated tactical thinking, coordinated assault patterns, restraint under direct command. This will revolutionize our understanding of Shaxal cognitive development. They're good kids, Ruby said, scratching Fang Hu's ears. They just needed someone to believe in them. You have been promoted, Quilmesh continued, consulting his datapad. Effective immediately. Full authority over the new program. Budget approved. Resources allocated. The Council moves quickly when motivated by success and terror. Ruby laughed. I'll take it. That night, after the debriefs and paperwork and medical examinations, Ruby sat in the habitat with the 3 cubs sprawled around her. Fang Hu's head rested in her lap, Shadewalks pressed against her side, Blazeclaw tangled across both of them in his usual chaotic fashion. You did good today, Ruby murmured. Really good. But understand something. That was self-defense, protecting our home. We don't hunt for sport. We don't hurt for fun. We protect what matters. Understand? Fang Hu rumbled agreement. Shadewalks purred. Blazeclaw was already asleep, snoring in a way that shouldn't have been anatomically possible. Ruby pulled up her datapad, scanning the new messages. Requests from a dozen species wanting to enroll their difficult youth. Inquiries from military branches about tactical applications. Even a message from her old commanding officer. Knew you'd figure it out. Nobody handles impossible situations like you. 6 months later, Beacon's watch had transformed. The xenobiology wing now housed 30 juvenile predators from 8 different species, all learning discipline, cooperation, and control. The program had a waiting list. Ruby ran it with the same principles she'd applied to those first 3 cubs: respect, consistency, trust. Some species adapted quickly, others took months, but they all learned. Fang Hu, Shadewalks, and Blazeclaw had graduated to assistant trainers, helping socialize newcomers. Watching Fang Hu patiently correct a younger cub's stance, or Shadewalks demonstrate proper stalking technique, filled Ruby with pride she couldn't quite articulate. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were teachers, leaders, proof that with the right approach, any species could bridge the gap between instinct and civilization. Ruby stood in the observation corridor, watching the latest group of cubs run through drills. A small crowd had gathered, as always, marveling at the sight. Someone asked her once how she'd known it would work, how she'd been so confident facing those first 3 cubs. Ruby had smiled and said something diplomatic about training and experience. But the truth was simpler. She'd grown up on a frontier world where survival meant understanding that fear and respect weren't the same thing, that violence and strength weren't synonymous, that sometimes the most dangerous creatures just needed someone to say at ease and mean it. The galaxy was full of predators, prey, and everything in between. Ruby had learned to speak all their languages. And really, that was just another way of saying she understood that under all the fur, scales, and teeth, everyone was just looking for someone to trust. She pulled out her communicator, responding to the latest inquiry about the program. Behind her, Through the observation window, Fang Hu caught her eye and performed a perfect sitting posture, showing off for the crowd. Ruby grinned. "Show off," she muttered affectionately. But she was smiling,